All right, everyone. Well, for those of you that are familiar with my face and my voice, you will recognize me as John Munnier. I'm the producer of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and this is kind of a new thing that we're starting up here. Myself and some of the board members slash president and whatnot of NAFA. Just to give you a quick introduction or a quick why, I guess, as to why this is happening. I myself and other NAFA members have talked in the past about just basically to amongst ourselves and also to Martin, the current president, who you'll be seeing here in a minute, and some of the other board members as to just how can the communication and the transparency and other things between NAFA and its members maybe be a little bit better. I know, like myself and a lot of other people I know, the biggest question usually is, well, what's going on? I mean, what other than getting that occasional message from the president that you might get in your email occasionally, so on and so forth. Um, I mean, we don't really oftentimes hear very much from some of the board members from NAFA and the other powers that be, so to speak. So I thought it would be cool to reach out to Martin and the other board members that I know personally from NAFA and try and do some kind of collaboration here and just kind of maybe see if we could get some more interpersonal updates so that members know where their hard-earned dues money is going and where their membership fees and all that kind of stuff is being allotted to, some of the different projects going on, some of the different basically just different things that NAF is trying to do, somewhat behind the scenes, somewhat a little bit more in the forefront, so on and so forth. But that being said, that's how this all came to be. And I thought it would be cool to go ahead and give this a shot here so that all the members can be a little bit more in the know on a more regular basis as to some of the different things that are going on that NAF is trying to accomplish for us, the current and potential members. So that being said, I am currently talking right now with Martin Geleynse, the current president of NAFA. Say hello, Martin.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, and thank you for agreeing to do this and brainstorming this with me. And between yourself and the other board members, I think this is going to be a pretty cool way to kind of add another little bit of added value to the membership for current and prospective NAFA members. And thanks for taking the time to do it.
Well, thank you, and thank you for actually for suggesting it and putting together the presentation and to the board to make this happen. I think it's going to be a great additional way for us to reach out both to our current members and to the falconry community as a whole. So I really want to thank you, and I'm looking forward to participating in this on an ongoing basis. I think it as much as I enjoy writing the emails and getting those out. Emails have a very short shelf life, and there's only so much you can do when you're writing. Once one way communication. It's not interactive. So hopefully this will help members understand all of the things that are going on and some of the intricacies, and we'll be able to get better information out to people in a format they can consume. So I really want to thank you for pursuing this with the officers and the board.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. And I'm glad to kind of help with this and see how this goes and see kind of where we can, I don't know, evolve this. I think it would be cool in the future to kind of, like you said, have a little bit more back and forth between members and the board and possibly even do some other types of interactive ideas in the future. But all that being said, this is our first introductory attempt at this. So um, let's go ahead and just start off real quick, though, and just make a couple of announcements that we need to get out to our current
Sure.
members and prospective members too. So,
I'm sure there's probably a lot. John, you and I, we talked a few things just before this about how to keep the agenda sort of under control, because there is always a lot going on. NAFA's a pretty busy place, so we'll start out with just a couple of very simple announcements. It's September 24th as we're recording this. If you're listening to this, hopefully you're listening to this on or before the September 28th, because NAFA's early bird registration for the field meet is closes on the 28th. So after that, you lose the early bird discount. We know that all the hotel rooms are booked, but not everybody has actually registered for the meet yet. So we know we got a lot of registrations coming. Don't delay. Also on September 28th, the Saturday coming, is the NAFA raffle. I've sent out emails to all of the members, and you'll get a last day warning and a 3-day warning. I put a challenge in there. One of the prizes is that there's 3 hoods that are going to be drawn, 3 Huber hoods. Now I got a new Tercel peregrine, and I got a couple of Tercel hoods, but not too many. I've been flying a lot of females, so I need a Tercel peregrine hood. I put my $100 in there. I'm gonna win me one of those hoods. And so everybody out there, here's my challenge. It's all up to you as to how easy it is to win. And right, you want to put some money in there. You don't want to make it too easy. Last time I looked, I had about a 50-50 chance. So you want to be getting your money in there now before the 28th. Otherwise, you're just going to make my life too easy. And I know you don't want to do that. So,
Well, yeah, we should probably mention too the Andrew Ellis sweepstakes
yeah,
also.
see,
Yeah,
there's another one starting up, and we're working out just some final back and forth with the Falconry Fund. But the Andrew Ellis did a sweepstakes last year, which is open to anybody, falconers and non, because that's what a sweepstakes is. And he raffled off, or they essentially raffled off a painting, custom painting, your choice of subject matter, from Andrew Ellis, who's a world famous, top notch, world class artist, wildlife artist. And he has agreed to do that again. And so we're currently working out with the Falconry Fund whether the draw should happen at this year's NAFA meet, which is coming up pretty quick, or doing it a little later and giving everybody just a little more runway to hear about it and learn about it and decide to get tickets. That's a pretty rare opportunity. That's valued at about $7,000. That's what it would cost you if you picked up the phone and called Andrew yourself. So that's pretty significant. And the money, of course, goes to the Falconry Fund, which is used to support a lot of NAFA programs and NAFA related programs supporting the cultural heritage of falconry, education and promotion, and all of the rest of a lot of the things that NAFA does. So we work very closely with them.
cool. Yeah, the last I heard was that I think as of right now anyway, the drawing's supposed to be held the night of the banquet or the last night of the NAFA
Yeah,
meet.
that was their plan. I did actually, and this is, as I said, it's a work in progress. I just had suggested that maybe it would give people a bit of a better opportunity if it was delayed, if the actual drawing was a little bit delayed. I'm only concerned that the time is short between now and the NAFA meet, and I want to give everybody a chance to learn about it. But that's ultimately their call, and they'll make that decision.
Yeah, and it's also important to note too that any entry into the sweepstakes and depending on however many passes you decide to buy, it's all tax deductible too.
Yep, that's right. Yep, if you're a U.S. resident, it's tax deductible. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. What other announcements do we have before we get started? Then
So that was it for announcements. The other 2 topics we want to talk about, 3 actually we'll touch on, but yeah, that's it for just the quick news.
cool. We'll go ahead and lead us into the first big topic. I guess we should say.
We're going to talk about 3 things, and we're going to talk about peregrines and normalization. We're going to talk about the USDA, and we're going to talk very briefly about 3186A database. So just so you know where we are, right, in the roadmap. Topic number 1, peregrines. Okay. So many of you know, if you've been paying attention, that we are anticipating an environmental assessment will be released, or a draft environmental assessment will be released soon, and we're trying to figure out how soon and where that is actually. That will hopefully result in the normalization of peregrine harvest in the United States. And what normalization means is it would not be any different than trapping a red tail or a Cooper's hawk or something like that. No special permit required, no draw allocation type of thing. So let's back up a little bit and say, how did we get here? The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service prepared a status report, an updated status report on the peregrine populations in North America, and that was released by the Fish and Wildlife Service in 2023, or maybe late 2022, but I think it was 2023. It's been out for a while. You can, if you Google it, you can download it and read it. It's a great read. Was one of the principal authors was Brian Millsap, who subsequently retired from the service, but there's a few others. That report supports the normalization of peregrine take, and it includes quite a bit of population data and updated modeling data. It using the models that were prepared, that all of falconry harvest is based on right now. The falconry harvest is based on it's maximum sustainable yield. Half, it's basically saying any bird can be taken up to half its maximum sustainable yield, capped at 5% of the young birds produced every year, right? So if you think about how many young birds are produced, what is the sustainable maximum you can take sustainably out of that? And usually it's 10 or 15%. And they want to make it half of that, but not more than 5%. All of that is designed so that the service doesn't have to monitor the take all that closely. If you have an up year or a down year with birds, it doesn't matter. The reality is most of the take for most species is in the 0.5% range, right? Some birds, it's a titch over 1%. Localized populations like Harris hawks, which have a relatively small range, and for which is they nudge up into the couple of percent range. So they're all very small. We are not a significant take. So if they do that math on peregrines, given their current, I won't read you should read the report yourself, but the low end, they have everything in biology is always a range, low end, high end. We're not too sure, somewhere in this range. The low end of the allowable take would be a total of 741 peregrines each year. Now, give you a little context, right? I mean, I know most falconers go, wow, that's crazy. In fact, for context, that is more than the total take of all species of raptors by all falconers, frankly, in North America. There's no way that falconers would, that there's not even that many falconers that would attempt to take a peregrine or would want one. So that's a very high number, right? The reality is, best guess we have is that if you opened up peregrine take wide open, 140, 50 would actually be taken, which is actually in line with the current allocation, right? In the current system, 144 passage peregrines east of the 100th can be taken. And typically the fill rate is about half of that, right? About half are actually taken. And there's others in the West, which is an IS only take. And so the total take in the US is could be as high as 342, but actually a fraction of that is actually taken. And the reason for the fill rate in the East being 50% is, as you know, is that you have to put in for a draw months beforehand. You have to get selected. Then if you get selected, there's months go by till you're actually out in the field. And things can happen. Life can happen. So people who are only half interested might draw a permit and then not go out. Other people are seriously interested, but something happens in their life. They move, they lose their job, this happens, that happens, and they decide, I don't want it anymore. And then other people go out and they don't manage to fill one, right? So all of that leaves out people who were eager, knew how to get a peregrine, knew where to get one, but didn't draw a permit. So that's why no matter what, you always, if you're at 144, you're not at 100% fill rate. You don't get 100% fill rate. Doesn't matter if you're talking about elk tags, deer tags, peregrine tags. In this case, the fill rate is never 100%. The only way to ensure that everybody who wants one has an opportunity is to normalize. So that's why NAFA supports normalization, and we think that the status report strongly supports that. What the service did after the status report, so where are we now? They went out to the flyways, they presented this status report, they gathered some feedback from the flyways, and ultimately they have developed a set of alternatives. If you think about every environmental assessment that the service has done related to falconry, there's always like 5 management alternatives, right? One of which will be their recommended alternative. So in the draft EA, environmental assessment, they will go give all this background information, and they will describe the different alternatives and the potential impact of those alternatives, and then they will one is recommended. Then it goes out for public comment. Okay, so our understanding is that draft EA has been written. One of the things that needed to happen was the status report on which it is based needed to get scientifically peer reviewed. And we understood that that was underway. We're trying to get from the service any information on where that is. We know that the authors of that report have not been given any feedback or questions or criticism or anything. Nothing has come back to them, which is normal. That's normally a part of it. That's normal peer review. Somebody reads it, they say, hey, it's a little weak here. We don't like this, or please explain that. That hasn't happened. So we're not too sure where that's been kind of quiet. We know that the alternatives have been developed. So it sounds like it's pretty ready to go, and we're not too sure why it's not out in the public sphere yet. We're hoping that'll happen soon. We have been reaching out to the service, all of the decision makers, and trying to get other people who have other avenues into the service to also nudge them and get them on the phone. They've committed to scheduling a meeting, but we haven't got the schedule yet. So we're starting to, we're turning the screws as hard as we can there, and hopefully in the next week or two we'll have definitive answers on where that is. There is some within the falconry community, some concern that perhaps HPAI has, they're nervous about the effect of HPAI on peregrines, because there is some information starting to circulate that some nest sites are suddenly unoccupied in some regions. There have been 20%, 30%, a percent of the nest sites are suddenly unoccupied, and the suspicion is that it's HPAI is doing that. So we don't know, but we don't have any, that's all speculation. There's no definitive information that we have that is causing a problem. In reality, I hope that's not the case, because none of that HPAI information is what you'd call peer reviewed. It's 2 years worth of data collected, and it's not published. It's not normalized. It's not scientifically evaluated. It's very anecdotal in nature. Compared to the rigorous data in the status report that is itself being peer reviewed. And, we're sort of told on the one hand that if you want to justify a take, you have to have this rock solid scientific case. And it would be disappointing in the extreme. In fact, you're looking at a guy who would be pretty upset if they then turn around and said, yeah, but you could knock it off the rails with, any anecdotal data you find. No, right? If it's good for the data, that data that knock it off the rails had better be as solid as the data that we put together to get it on the rails in the first place. So
can't have it both ways.
Can't have it both ways. Sorry, I mean, if we're going to be held to a standard, you got to apply the same standard all across the board.
Correct.
So that's important, and we're going to continue to push that. And the reality is, wildlife populations fluctuate all the time. The peregrines have been increasing for 40 years now, but they're not going to increase forever. At some point they're going to do that. They're going to go, okay, hey, we had some bad weather, we got a little sick, we got some disease going around, and it's going to start doing that sort of. That's what every wildlife population does. And they don't stop hunting ducks. By the way, the HPAI killed like millions of geese. They stopped hunting geese. Did they reduce the bag limits on geese?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the other thing, of course, is the important thing is that peregrines aren't very easy to trap. We're talking about a very small number, and if they're not there, because their population has declined, if they're not there, you can't trap. So it's kind of self-correcting. So anyway, I wish I had definitive news. I knew that if I wrote in my president's message in the August Hawk Talk that we expected to have it out by the time you read this. I told myself, don't say that, Martin. If you say that.
Yeah.
But
well, so then my question back to you then, of course, as a dues paying member of NAFA as well, and I know what everybody else is thinking right at this moment is, well, you said soon, and so I know obviously you can't sit here and speak, because there's other people that you have no control over as far as how quickly they're going to move on things. That's just the way life is. And that being said, I mean, I will phrase the question in this way: is it a realistic hope that we might have it by next year's trapping season?
so let me back up. I will get to I'll answer your question, but I want to make a few things clear. You're right. It's not entirely up to us. The last official word we've had is the expectation is, yes, it will be soon. In fact, we expected it in the summer. So to be fair to the service, and I don't always like to be fair to the service, but I'll be fair to the service, right? Um, they have a lot of things on their plate, and they're quite understaffed. Like they have a lot of open positions. They're not, they are juggling balls and trying to deal with a lot of different issues all at the same time. So, given some of the issues on their plate, this is not from our. I can tell you, it's NAFA's number one issue. This is the top priority NAFA has. The officer team, myself and Heath. This is it. But it's probably not the service's number one top priority. Okay, they got lots of other big issues going on, and so what
Of
we need to
course,
do is get
we're
to the right
we're
level
small
of
number
people
of
and
people.
get
Yeah.
get them to spend enough time on it, keep the ball moving. So that's what we're going to do. Now, realistically, is this going to be in place for next year's trapping season? I It's possible. I wouldn't, even if it came out in the spring or summer, honestly, I would not have bet on that. It's just the wheels of government turn quite slowly. The process is this: they put out this, they prepare this thing, they get this scientific, status report, they get a peer review, they put it out as part of a draft environmental assessment. It goes out for public comment for 45 days, 60 days, whatever they decide. Let's say 60 days of public comment. Given it's peregrines, given there's HPI, I imagine they're going to get lots of comments. Probably maybe thousands even, right? I mean, that's the falconry community needs to come out big, but they're going to get information and concerns and so forth, and they have to analyze that information. And then they have to develop, maybe tweak their recommendations. They have to analyze it and come up with their final decision of what they're going to do as a result of all the comments based on the 5 recommendations and how they might modify those. That can easily take a year. If it's a priority, it'll take 4 months, 6 months. If it's not a priority, it can easily take a year, right? I mean, if you think about what USDA did on when they did their animal welfare regulations, there was a year between the comment period close and they came out with the regulations. And then, right. So I don't want to set false expectations. It's possible that it could be in place for the 2025 trapping season, but I wouldn't bet the farm on it. I think it is at best 50-50, even if they came with it, right?
So it's more realistic to maybe expect 2026 then.
I want to temper expectations. I'm hopeful that had we done this on the time frame that they originally said, the EA would have come out last year in 2023. And then we would have been there for sure. Now it's delay, and it's summer. You think about if it came out in the spring or let's say June, then yeah, it could be in place. But now it's already September. It is now the trapping season, right?
Sure.
So
Mhm.
it's unfortunate, which is why this is our anxiousness or whatever our eagerness to get in touch with the service is going on with every day. So like I said, this would be a big change, and we certainly don't want to let the status report start to get old. We want to strike while the iron is hot, and apparently it's all ready to go. And you know what, next week, for all I know, it could appear in the Federal Register. There are rules associated with how much information they can give us because it's going to public comment. What they can't do is they can't tip the scales in favor of any one group. So, it is entirely possible that we won't know what the status of this thing is until it comes up.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, and just to clarify, of course, not just for yourself, but everyone, watching this as well or listening to this too is, obviously questions not posed to try and nail any one particular person against the wall as far as a straight up, definitive answer or anything. But, I mean, everybody has different definition of what soon is, right? So like, just that's why I wanted a little bit more further clarification because
Yeah, I
obviously,
think most often we have soon is like next week or next month, right? I've been dealing with governments for so long that I have a different definition of soon, right?
sure. Well, and that's why I wanted to make sure to ask the follow-up clarification question for that was because, like I said, I know that Even though we're a small bunch, there's still enough of us that there's going to be a lot of different definitions of what soon is.
There is a lot of interest at the Flyway Council level. There are a lot of states. As much as we always hear about a few states that aren't crazy about expanding peregrine take in the Northeast, especially, there are plenty of states that do support us, that are very eager to see this thing pass. And we're contacting those states now and trying to get them to help us pressure the service into moving forward and making sure that this doesn't sit any longer than is necessary, because they don't like going through the draw process, and they're all about making sure that people have maximum access to wildlife resources that the resource can handle, and people have an opportunity to interact with a healthy wildlife resource, that's what their job is, right?
Sure.
And so they're doing that. It's not, I don't want to make this sound like it's all bad news and we got, or we don't know where everything's. So we're working a system that is kind of clunky and a little understaffed right now, and got some divided attentions, and we're doing the best we can. And like I said, it's our highest priority. Something's going to happen.
Awesome. Okay.
And
Well, I
it's
mean,
not like
that's
it's
fair
all gonna
enough.
disappear and we're all going to go move on and do something else. That is not going to happen. We are not letting go of this bone.
Well, I think that's what people mainly need to hear. It's one of the obviously the biggest hot button issues that there is, and hearing it from the horse's mouth instead of, well, like you said, instead of like a one way, communication via an email or something. I think is gonna really, I mean, even though it's kind of can be clear as mud still to some people or whatever, at least it's a very current, a very now update on where things are at with all of that. And I'm sure that there's a lot of resources and a lot of people that have to be allocated for that, so
Yeah. So, um,
is there anything else you want to add on that?
no,
Or I mean,
I mean, I remain hopeful that we'll have the conversation. To be honest with you, also to be fair, the reason why I have is that it is often difficult to get a hold of the right people in the service at the high enough level that we need to get to. But invariably, when we do, we find that things are in fact moving along a little more than we, than than we had, than our worst fears had led us to believe, right? I mean, as I've tried to explain to many people, in the absence of any information, all you have is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So, things go quiet for a while, and of course, falconers' minds just gravitate directly to, oh, everything is going is different. And the reality is, it's not going to be as bad as that. It's just, um, you know, we need to be the squeaky wheel sometimes.
sure. Well, and that's part of the reason why we're doing this right now, right? To kind of
Yeah.
alleviate some of that
So
speculation. Yeah.
I have email and voicemails sitting in the inbox of a number of the people in the Migratory Bird Management Office at the Fish and Wildlife Service, and if they happen to be listening to the call, I won't mention their names in order to protect the guilty. But if you happen to be watching this, you know my number. All right.
Very cool. Well, if you don't have anything else to add then on this particular topic, I guess we can go ahead and move on to the next bigger one that we want to discuss then. And
Yeah. Okay. So let's go. This is a topic that we've also NAFA has spent quite a bit of time on. I would say maybe not in the last year, but in the 2 years before, and that is the as I'm sure most of the listeners know, the USDA APHIS, which is the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, which is a sub department of the USDA. Developed some new regulations to cover the keeping of birds, specifically birds used for uh, uh, education and display, some research, and dealers of those birds, and breeding of them for pets. So, pet bird breeders, pet bird dealers, people who display and exhibit birds. And so and if you followed my email messages and my Hawk Talk president's messages, you will know that we work pretty hard and pretty closely with the USDA as they were going through their public comment period. We submitted a very detailed comment on their draft regulations, probably in talking to them, one of the most detailed comments out of thousands of comments that they received, focused on raptors. Subsequent to that, we actually have had a number of conversations with the project managers that were developing these regulations at the USDA to help them, because they had questions for us about, well, what's normal? How do people what is the normal best practices for keeping raptors? What kind of perches do you use? Do you do this kind of thing? What do you do for, they had a lot of questions that were kind of a little surprising to me personally. Like, what do you do for enrichment? Which is, when you have animals in captivity, you're supposed to give them things so that they don't just sit around and look out the window. I don't know what that means. I guess for some birds that means you give them tennis balls to play around with or something, right? And so we answer those questions like, well, nothing. I mean, enrichment for a falcon is being able to look out the window, and if they get bored, they stand on the other foot for a little while. And as long as they get stuff to look at, they're pretty happy, and they're fed, and it's pretty simple. They're not. I don't know. I have seen raptors play briefly a little bit when they're young, maybe a little bit. It's pretty unusual. So anyway, we went through all kinds of things like that. Different perches, the things, the hot button things, or the common things that animal welfare deals with. Things like animals having choice about where they sit and the type of perch and all these sorts of things. We went through all that stuff in detail, and try to help them understand. And I think that I'm very pleased with how that worked out, because they look at us as honest brokers. We'll give them the information, and part of the reason for that is that when they came out with their regulations, like I said, it was dealt with breeding birds as pets, breeding birds for displaying those birds, and breeding them for research purposes. And if you're dealing and transporting them, what's not covered is falconry. Right? Falconry is exempt from those regulations because it's not pet birds. It's not, so they complete explicit carve out as not, it's not even carved out really. It's just say that it's not covered. It's an activity that is not covered. And those regulations are activity based. It's what are you doing with the bird? And if what you are doing is covered by the law, it doesn't matter if you have a Fish and Wildlife Service permit. It doesn't matter if it's native or non-native or a hybrid. Does not matter. If it's a bird and you're doing this educational displays to the public, you're covered if you have more than 4 birds. So anyway, we have falconry is exempt. Bird abatement, falconry-based bird abatement, is not covered because it's not pet keeping. It's not all those. It's not public display. There's a few gray areas like falconry schools. Are they covered? And anyway, the reason for bringing it up as part of this podcast is I get a pretty steady stream, low level but steady level of questions from people who are falconers, who also do exhibition or also do bird abatement or do all 3, or have a falconry school or whatever, and they're trying to understand what's covered. In some cases, they're trying to decide, do I need to get a permit? In other cases, they're being inspected. And so they come up with questions about it. And there's plenty of misunderstandings. So I think this is an opportunity maybe to help people understand where things are. So before I get into any further, I want to make one thing very clear. I'm going to give you my understanding of what's exempt and what's not exempt, and a general overview of our understanding based on our conversations with the USDA. This is not legal advice, okay? I'm not going to give you legal advice. I'm not. You should not get a permit or not get a permit because Martin Geleynse said so or said not. You have a responsibility as a listener, if you are possessing birds and using them in any of those types of activities, to understand the law and comply with it. I'm just going to give you, for some informational purpose, some information on what we have been told in general terms. Okay, your specific situation is really something you need to look at yourself. So with that caveat, it's very clear in the regulations, crystal clear, that falconry, the practice of falconry, getting a bird, trapping a bird or getting a captive bred bird and using it for hunting, that activity, possessing a bird for the purpose of hunting with it, is not covered at all under the USDA regulations. So, and essentially using those falconry techniques in another capacity, like bird abatement, also not covered because you're using falconry techniques. The activity is the same, right? From the USDA's eyes. Whether you're flying your falcon and getting paid for it, or flying your falcon and for fun, that's irrelevant. You're flying your falcon, right? So that's not covered. And if you are anything related, anything that is in the service of that activity is also not covered. So if you are breeding birds for falconry, that's related to falconry. It comes under that umbrella. It's not covered. If you are teaching falconry, like you're a sponsor, that's not covered. It's part of falconry. I have talked to a few people that do falconry schools, and I would have to say that there's definitely an area there where if you're operating a falconry school, you probably need to be a little careful. If what you are doing is really educating potential falconers or actual apprentices or potential apprentices about falconry, that's principally what you are talking about, including the use of birds of prey and the conservation of birds of prey. But the focus is hunting with a bird of prey. Well, you can certainly make the case that I'm exempt. It's not a public display of these birds. I'm teaching falconry. But if you also take those birds and go to public venues and display them, well, you're in a hybrid situation, right? I mean, it will not be a defense to then say, yes, but they're held under my falconry school permit. The USDA doesn't care about what your permit is. It's what you are doing, right? If what you are doing is displaying your birds to the public in a bird show or something like it, that's the thing. That's what you're doing. Then you need to get licensed by the USDA. So that's important. So ask yourself, what am I doing? Am I displaying birds to the public? Yes, need a license. If you have more than 4 birds, if you have 4 or fewer, you don't need a license. There is some interesting aspects of the law, however, because you could say, well, my husband has 4 birds and I have 4 birds. And we sort of, but he's got his own license and I got my own license and we have 4%. They actually, the USDA they have a specific provisions in the regulations to prevent that kind of splitting. They look at the whole facility. And so you can't divide the number of birds between individuals at the same facility. That won't pass. So if you are in that situation, please consult those regulations because you may in fact need to get yourself licensed. If you are a breeder and you are only breeding birds for falconry, and you sell birds to falconers, or you export them for falconry, then you do not need a permit, and you can tell the potential inspector who comes to see you that this is what I'm doing. It's not covered. It says right here in the regulations, and they'll be fine. In that note, if you do get inspected, obviously we have our experience with the people that we've talked to at the USDA who are maybe at the more policy level, they're not the ground level inspectors, is that they are trying to come up with, they want the things to go as smoothly as possible. They are not interested in trying to impose unreasonable requirements that aren't normal or best practices on people. And I hope there are a few efforts hopefully that will start to take fruit, that will start to get some traction as these inspections are underway, to try to formalize some of that guidance to be falconry, to codify the falconry best practices. In other words, what NAFA's interest is making sure that falconry-related activities don't end up with a set of standards that are not falconry friendly, because that will start to put pressure on falconry to conform to those other standards, right? And we don't want to see that. We want to make sure that all raptors, that we believe that falconry standards are the best standards for all raptors, and we want to make sure that there's not multiple classes of people doing different things with raptors, and suddenly falconry getting under pressure to conform to what we consider to be suboptimal types of standards, right? I mean, the reality is, for example, the general application of you should always have water for every bird should have access to water, and every bird should have a multiple perching surfaces. Well, there's plenty of cases in falconry where you do not want that to be the case. And so we're trying to make sure we get in some of their guidance. So this is below the regulations and their standard practices, those kinds of falconry friendly things, so that it never comes back to us, and also so that the people who are engaged in these activities can, take advantage of normal falconry best practices when they're housing their birds, even if it isn't for falconry. Now, that said, lots of inspectors out there, and the inspector, your mileage may vary based on what inspector comes in the door. And I've certainly heard a few cases where, there's been some back and forth, between the inspector and the person being inspected. And hopefully those issues will go down. So I just wanted to try to clarify for people a little bit, give them a little bit of an idea of when you're covered and when you're not.
And just to clarify too, you mentioned the non-natives or exotics as well, and all that kind of stuff too, right? Not applicable.
Yeah. The Animal Welfare Act and the regulations under the Animal Welfare Act apply regardless of the native origin of the birds. Right.
Okay.
So
yeah,
you can, if you're displaying Saker falcons, you're using Saker falcons in your public displays. You don't need a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service permit, but if you got more than 4 of them, you need a USDA permit.
Gotcha. So it's more about the number as opposed to origin. Okay.
Yeah, and so, but that 4 birds, that the USDA calls that a de minimis exemption. Right? So they have a number of exemptions in the law where if your level of activity is small enough, they'll sort of ignore you. And so they have, for education and display, they have a de minimis exemption. For breeding for pet birds, for dealers, there's a de minimis exemption. There's 1 or 2. There isn't a de minimis exception for breeders. So a breeder who breeds a bird for display, there's no de minimis exemption. So what it means is that if you breed, let's say, for sake of the argument, you breed 100 falcons every year, and 99 of them go to falconers, and 1 of them goes to a zoo, you're covered.
Okay.
So that's a you're covered. Don't do
Okay.
that. If you don't want to get a license, don't do that. Or get the license, or you get the license.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Well, cool. Is there anything else that you want to cover in particular on this particular topic, or you think
No,
that's good?
I think that kind of covers it. I mean, I guess I'd like to close by saying this: the regulations there's definitely a lot of they're relatively long, involved, and potentially, certainly more complicated than any of the standards that we've seen in falconry regulations or as permit conditions by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So there's a lot there, and there's a lot to understand in those regulations. They're not designed. Yeah, I think that that's on the negative. On the positive side, the people that we have been dealing with are genuinely trying to do they don't want to impose requirements that are unnecessary or actually harmful. They've been working with us in a positive way to try to understand how that works out with respect to raptors. We in our last conversation we talked about hawk boxes and the amount of ventilation in the hawk box, and their regulations prescribe a certain percentage of the surface area of the box that has to be open for ventilation. And that was one area where they had been getting into a lot of trouble with educators because they're taking the birds around in their vehicles, so the standard hawk box that most people have been using did not have enough ventilation area according to these regulations. That we've been using them for years, they're perfectly fine, didn't meet the standards. And we talked about this, and we said, well, where do you get the standards? How'd you come up with that number? And they said, well, we used a number that we use for mammals, basically. And so the number was given as a percentage. So I just did a quick bit of math on the back of an envelope to calculate how many square inches that was. And I said, yeah, because of course, the more ventilation you have, the more light gets in, right? Which defeats the purpose of the box, right? I said, yeah, Cody, that's too much. And he said, well, yeah, a lot of people are telling us that. I said, well, how come, how did you, well, why did you go with that? And he said, we got thousands of comments. Not one of them said too much surface area on the box. They're like, nobody made the comment. And it's true. If you didn't actually do the math, you wouldn't have noticed that, oh, that's kind of a lot of, that's too much, right? that's why public comments are important. You got to read the fine print, I guess. You know, in the meantime, they're working with the hawk box manufacturers, trying to use louvers and do things to solve the problem. You know, they'll probably change that regulation. They'll change the standard when they get, you know, to revising the regulations, which will take a little while. But that's an example of, well, you know, something we didn't catch something, and nobody caught it, and it went out. It's not perfect, and so they're trying to, you know, find a practical solution in the meantime. So
Okay. Well, and so yeah, I mean, if you're good with that, then I guess we could go ahead and move on to the final honorable mention
honorable mention.
topic.
Won't get
And
into it, yeah, I won't get into it in a horrible amount of detail, but as you, most of you probably know by now, the 30186A has had a revamp. Apparently, so there's a new login procedure using login.gov, which I think the whole U.S. government is going towards that single sign-on type of approach. So it's more secure and it's more. Eventually, I think that you'll be using that for everything from the USDA to the Fish and Wildlife Service. And I already, for example, even as a Canadian, I have a login.gov account because I use it for my Fish and Wildlife Service permits, and I also use it for my Nexus card importing myself into the United States. Um, so uh, you know, it's that's the way that's going. So that's not entirely unexpected. That's not wasn't up to the service to do that. They got told you're going to use this new login system. And the other change that was made, there were a few, I think, usability issues that were fixed, and some bugs hopefully that were fixed. But the one significant change that will affect everyone is that you can no longer edit a record once it's been submitted. And that is significant in the sense that if you make a typo, what they want you to do is contact your state falconry coordinator, inform them of the error and the thing that you want to fix, and they will make the change. I'm not going to get into the reasons why they think they're doing this, but because that would be another conversation, would take us a lot longer to go through. But the reality, what I want to do is I want to impress on everyone how important it is for you to actually do that. If you notice after submission that there's a mistake, typo, you know, address is wrong, the permit number of the person you got the bird from has, you know, number transposed, or anything, regardless of how trivial, please ensure you contact your state falconry coordinator and get the change made, because otherwise you have knowingly made a false statement. You know it's a false, oh, I made a mistake, so now it's a false statement and you know it, right? I mean, the downside of this whole process, and without, again, you know, to try to protect the guilty, is that, you know, making a mistake, you've kind of taken a typo and criminalized it if you don't make the call. So make the call and
okay.
read it twice before you hit submit.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, at least there's not a whole big thing of terms and conditions to read along with it too.
oh,
Think about.
I know. Maybe in a subsequent podcast, I'm going to do a little more homework on this topic, and maybe we'll get into more of, you know, why was this done, and you know, uh, I have a feeling, you know, again, ever the optimist. I have a feeling that at some point, state coordinators are going to get a little bit tired of, you know, doing everyone's editing for them, and which is another reason why you should definitely call the state coordinator, because you know, they asked for this. I mean, they asked, so
Yeah.
give them what they asked for. Man, my guess is that after, you know, a little while, they will start to question, you know, why they're spending so much time updating people's forms, and it'll
Cool.
change. Sometimes
Okay.
bad ideas, you know, sort of take care of themselves.
Well, and on that note, I think that's probably as good as any as usual to
Yeah.
go ahead and you know, wrap this up. Is there anything else you want to mention before we conclude this first
No, I want to thank you again for doing this and for putting the energy into it. I want to wish everybody a great start up to the falconry season. I know my birds are getting going, and I'll be heading out to Saskatchewan in this weekend, and I'm looking forward to getting my birds under some partridge and grouse. And I hope everybody else is having a birds are all finished molting, and they're looking forward to a season 2. I hope to see you in Liberal, Kansas.
You will. You will. Yeah, I definitely am looking forward to it, and it'll be a good time. And yeah, and if let us know for anyone watching this. Let us know somehow or another what you think. You can even though this isn't technically a Falconry Chronicles production, it's just the dude from Falconry Chronicles that's kind of doing this in conjunction with and for NAFA. If you have any other ideas or any other questions or topics, I mean, feel free to email me at falconrychronicles@gmail.com for these future ones. And should they email you
Yeah,
possibly,
they
Martin,
could
for other ideas? Or
it would be great if we could. I mean, I'm just doing this, thinking about this on the fly. I mean, if we got questions that people fire in, and we can answer them on a format like this, taking questions from the members, that'd be great. Yeah, give us a chance to do homework on the questions and give a fulsome answer. That'd be awesome.
cool. Well, what's your email address so they can possibly email you some ideas or suggestions on that too?
Best you can email two ways. You can go NAFA President at n-a-f-a.com. So NAFA with dashes in between, NAFA President, or my name, Martin.Geleynse at NAFA.com. That'll either way will get to me, and you can find it on the website. You can look it up there as well, and you can find the email address. And yeah, drop me a line, and I think it would be great to have some of those kinds of issues and questions dealt with in a format like this.
Perfect. All right. Well, if you're good, then I'm good. I just want to say thanks for everybody. Thanks to everybody for listening and for watching. However you're taking this in. I hope you find it informative. I hope you find this useful, or I hope you find that this might be I don't know, a better way to consume your updates from NAFA, and hopefully you like it. Um, Let us know, and hopefully we'll get another one out to you within the next month or two, and as especially as things definitely develop, I'm more than happy to help make these happen however often they need to be. So thanks again, Martin, for your time and for helping
Thank
with
you.
it, and we'll call it good until the next
Yeah,
one. All right.
yeah. All the best until next time.
Awesome. Thanks.
Take care.